It only took 9 years, but after 5 seasons of Stranger Things, the show finally aired its series finale on New Year's Day. Did it stick the landing, or was it a little bit underwhelming? Let's discuss. Hello everyone, my name is Jay and welcome back to my channel. Now this is a spoiler review of the Stranger Things Season 5 finale, so as always, if you've not seen it, go and watch it, save this video to your watch later playlist, and then come back when you've seen the episode. Otherwise, let's get into it. I want to start with the characters, and given this is a series finale, the show obviously has the task of giving everyone a satisfying conclusion, and I think Stranger Things was mostly successful at doing that. However, one of the biggest gripes I have about the finale, and I guess the show as a whole, is actually the lack of death. You can call me a killjoy if you want, but it's quite surprising that throughout the entire run, they've never really killed a main character. I mean, we had characters like Bob, who, yes, he died in season 2, but he was actually introduced earlier that season, just to be killed off in the same run. And if you look across different seasons of the show repeats that formula quite a lot. I mean, season 1 you had Barb, in season 3 you have Alexei, in season 4 you have Eddie. Last season we did have Matthew Modine's Dr. Brenner finally meet his demise, so you could argue that he was a main character, he was a starring cast member. However, he was not really part of the main core group that we know and love. He was a character that we kind of knew was going to die eventually, or we're almost kind of rooting for. And I think, to be honest, the same argument could be applied to Max's brother Billy in season 3. Credit where credit's due though, because in the season 5 finale they do actually kill 2 of their characters. So let's get into those 2. First of these is Callie, a character who I actually have a lot to say about. She was first introduced in season 2, episode 7's infamous worst episode of the show, according to fans, which was The Lost Sister. And she's been absent since then, never referenced, never brought up again. However, at the end of volume 1 in season 5, the big reveal is that she's the one in the lab that Dr. K has been keeping. Many fans actually casted doubt over her return, but I'll be honest, I was actually hoping for it. I think that given her history with Eleven and Henry and the lab, it would have been nonsensical not to bring her into the fold. The problem, however, is that she went from being one of my, I guess, I don't want to say hated, but one of my most disliked characters, even though she was in a standalone episode, to becoming one of the most boring recurring characters on the show. The Duffer Brothers have stated that they wanted to bring Callie back because they never really got a chance to showcase what the character or the actress was capable of, and I would agree with that, but the story that they ended up giving her in this final season was just really frustrating. I quickly grew tired of Callie telling Eleven repeatedly that Eleven would have to die alongside her, and that's the only way that the fighting is going to end. I understand her reasoning, and she's not entirely wrong in saying that either, but it just became really annoying to have that as really her only plot point. I know there was the whole thing where she went in and she saw all the pregnant women in the lab, and that kind of spurred her on for where she got to in the end. Callie did occasionally use her powers, and I was happy to see that. There was the sequence where she escaped from the lab initially, and there was also when she was helping Eleven and Max get all the children out of the Creel household in Henry's mind. But I would have liked to have seen much more of her powers because they're a really cool set of abilities, and the initial episode she was in, The Lost Sister, I thought showed them a little bit better. I would have liked to have seen more. Stranger Things wanted me to actually like Callie by the end of the show, then they failed miserably to the point where when she was dying, I just kind of sat there empty. I didn't have any emotion. I didn't love that she was dying, but I also didn't hate it either. I was just kind of watching like, yeah, this makes sense. Yeah, unfortunately, a wasted character that I think they could have done a lot more with, to be honest. Of course, the much more important death in the finale was Eleven and her sacrifice. Yes, her fate is somewhat ambiguous, and I choose to believe she died, and assuming she did, I'm really glad that she did it on her own accord, and it's not because Callie was there telling her at the time that she had to die as well. She made the choice on her own, and that's when my emotions were highest, especially when she had that scene with Mike, and they were saying goodbye to each other, trying to get him to understand the choice that she was making. That really worked, and it was a fitting end, in my opinion, for her character. And that also challenges my initial argument that the show is afraid to kill off the main characters. It really worked for me, so I'm glad that went the way it did. Don't get me wrong, I didn't want every character to die, and I'm so glad that many of them got those satisfying conclusions, but I think the Duffer Brothers stuck too much to that, as by season 5, and certainly in the finale, There were so many characters that almost made it a comedically large number of people. And if you look at Will's coming out scene a few episodes earlier, there were so many people there. And there was another scene, I think they were all stood out. Was it the lab perhaps, where Eleven had to use her powers and get rid of all the cameras? There were so many people behind her. It came across a little bit funny to me. The show has previously handled this by splitting characters off into their own missions and having them do their own things where they're not all together, and there were still elements of that in season 5, but it was inevitable that they were all going to come together at some point, and it really exposed that the cast has just become a little bit too bloated, I think, for a show full of these creatures that are hell-bent on killing everyone. For so many people to make it out alive, it's just a little bit surprising. Even in the season 5 premiere and going into the second episode, we had the attack on the Wheeler household, and I thought Ted Wheeler, and then I thought Karen Wheeler. I thought, they were maybe on the chopping block, but no, they will survive. We will see them in this finale, albeit with a few scars. A little bit surprising, but hey, it is what it is. The Mind Flayer also makes its big return in this finale, and I've seen some flack online about, oh, it wasn't as threatening as its previous appearance, but I must have been watching a different show because I absolutely loved that final battle when they were all in the abyss. And you've got to keep in mind that, yeah, maybe it looked a little bit different, but this is the first time we're seeing it on its home turf. We've never been to Dimension X in the Abyss to fight the Mind Flayer. It was a fitting way to end the series, and it was genuinely impressive. I loved the whole sequence. To those who say that the Mind Flayer was defeated too easily here, I can see where you're coming from for sure, but you've got to remember that the group were training to fight this battle for quite a long time now, and it's also not the first time they've defeated the Mind Flayer. The finale also gives us the reveal that Henry /Vecna /1 had been exposed to the Mind Flayer from a very young age, and to be honest, that was a little bit predictable to me, at least. I saw that coming from a while back, but what really impressed me was the fact that they doubled down on the choice of Henry being organically evil. There is a bit where, when Will finds this out, he tries to speak to Henry and reason with him, saying, you can fight back, try and do what I've done, you can help us defeat him together. But Henry says, no, every action I've done has been my own. I choose to stand with him. I thought that was a really, really good writing choice, and it contrasts Will's resistance to the Mind Flayer that he's tried to have throughout the whole show. Likewise, in terms of performances, I thought that Jamie Campbell Bower did a phenomenal job at portraying both Henry and Vecna. I think that having Henry there, and to me he was more interesting to watch, especially earlier on in the season as Mr. Whatsit, but certainly watching him really helped alleviate the problem of Vecna just being the generic bad guy. Really enjoyed the layers that Bower put into his performance. It was clear there was a difference between the two characters. Other cast members that I was a fan of this season include Gaten Matarazzo as Dustin, of course, Sadie Sink as Max, and Natalia Dyer as Nancy. They've always been favourites of mine throughout the whole show, although if there was one person who really impressed me this season and I did not expect to like them so much, it was Nell Fisher as Holly. Holly took up a lot of the screen time in season 5, and while she's not technically a new character, she hasn't really done much of anything in previous seasons, obviously being portrayed by different actresses before, so you really have to have a convincing actress in this role to convince viewers that this character is worth their time. There's a reason that this character, who hasn't done anything, is now getting so much time devoted to her in a show where the cast, as I said earlier, is already very large, and to have someone like this come in and dilute that time even more, it's a big risk, but I definitely think it paid off. It would have been very easy for Holly to become the annoying character, a hindrance to the plot, but no, she had a really good story. I really enjoyed the performance of Nell Fisher, and I think she's got a really bright future ahead of her. A great example of introducing a new character but having the opposite effect was Linda Hamilton's Dr. K. Amazing actress, yes, but very, very hollow character. No depth given to her whatsoever. When Eleven sacrifices herself, we don't see what happens to her or the military. Does she just leave town? I guess so, because she has nothing else to do. I kept thinking that we were going to get some stories, some backstories showing if she knew Brenner, but there was none of that. It's just a pointless bad guy that I just wasn't a fan of. I wish she had more to do, and it's a shame because, as I said, Linda Hamilton is a really good actress. Who knows what happened to Dr. K? We'll never know. I also want to acknowledge Winona Ryder, because this season I just didn't feel she had a lot to do. In the finale, she was actually with the group that went to the Abyss to fight Vecna, but it took me a little bit to realise that, because she just didn't say or do anything. She did have that final moment where she hacked off Vecna's head. She was getting the final hit on the villain, and I thought that was a brilliant choice to have her do that. We had her doing that, and we had the camera pan over all the other characters as archive footage of everyone we've lost over the years played. I thought that whole sequence was perfect, and I think Joyce certainly was justified in doing that. She was the correct one to finally kill Vecna. But compared to previous seasons, I just feel like this was maybe her only standout moment. In season 1, you know, she was the one that first began to question as her life, yes, turned upside down. But you know, none of that this season. She was there for Will, which you know, their scenes were good. But as an independent character, I wish they'd given her more to do. A big change from season 1 when we first met her. I also enjoyed that the finale gave us an expansion on previous scenes that we've seen throughout this season. We obviously had, I think it was in the 4th episode, maybe the 3rd episode this season, where Max went back in time in Henry's mind to his high school days, and we saw all our characters there as well. There was mention of Joyce's play, and we actually got to see that. We got to see Callie, Max, and Eleven again in Henry's mind, where they were backstage at Joyce's play, and that was really cool. I have been lucky enough actually to see the Stranger Things first shadow play in the West End in London. And I think the show did strike a fine line. They struck the right balance, rather, of not giving too much away about what happened in the play, and also not confusing audiences who hadn't seen it, but also providing enough satisfaction to those like me who had seen the play and went, oh yes, I understand what's going on here. I still wish that we got an acknowledgement from the parents, at least from Hopper and Joyce, that they actually knew Vecna, or Henry Creel, in high school. And I would have loved a wee cameo from Patty Newby, but you know, it is what it is. You can't confuse viewers too much because so much of the audience obviously can't see the play. Unfortunately though, there were a lot of unanswered questions in this series finale. First of all, and this one really frustrates me, where the heck was Dr. Owens? We last saw him in season 4, he was handcuffed to that pipe in the Nevada base when they were attacked, and that was the last day that we saw of him. It reminds me of season 1 when Dr. Brenner is seemingly killed but we never see the body. It's an obvious cliffhanger where we go, okay, they're going to come back to that. And they do, they bring him back a few seasons later for a more recurring role. But with Dr. Owens, I thought the same was going to happen, but nothing. No acknowledgement of where he is, what happened to him. He was one of my favourites, so really disappointed that we didn't see what happened to him. I guess maybe he's still handcuffed in that base, who knows. The same for Max's mum though. You know, she was in the last season, she had a significant role, I think, in Max's journey. But she didn't appear when her daughter was in the hospital, or when Max woke up, in fact. I don't want to hear that, you know, they visited her off screen. Like, her mother should have been there. That was just a weird choice. It wasn't the same as Owen's, where I was like, oh, I need to see Max's mum. That is essential. That I really want to see her. But, you know, her absence is still a little bit striking. Finally, the other question I have is, who unlocked Will's door in season 1? You know, it magically opened, and you know we know Demogorgons can't do that. I had read, maybe it's not true, maybe someone just posted this and you know it did the rounds and everyone believed it was going to happen, but I had read that the Duffer Brothers had said we were going to find out who actually opened that door. But I guess we have to assume it was Vecna. There was theories it was 11. Yeah, we don't know. That sucks. It goes without saying that for me at least, I think season 5 had a really rocky season, to the point where people were visiting the Upside Down like it was a tourist destination. People were going, having a good time, going in and out willy-nilly. A little bit unbelievable from season 1 when they were wearing their hazmat suits because the air was toxic. Maybe they've just learned more since then. I don't know, but I do think that this finale, it really did the job well. I think it stuck the landing, and the conclusions for the story and all the characters, for me at least, it worked, and it capped off the season, it put it out on a high note. I think it puts it in contention for one of the best episodes of the show. I think, at the moment, Dear Billy in season 3, episode 4 I think it is, still takes the crown, because, you know, Max is one of my favourites and nothing can beat that Kate Bush running up that hill sequence. But you know, this episode did a really good job, and I'm happy with where it ended up. What did you think though? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did it exceed your expectations? Did it leave you a little bit disappointed? Please let me know by leaving a comment below, and subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified when I post another video. I've got lots of good stuff coming up for 2026 and I can't wait to get started on it. That's all for now though, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.